Hello and welcome to Faithfully Stampin' with Jennifer Helm. I am Jennifer Helm, the Faithful Stamper, independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! Today I have for you a fun fold card technique. I'm calling this the DSP front fold panel card. A really big name for a card that's not really all that big, not all that fancy, but a little something different and a fun way to just kind of give your card a different look. So come craft along with me and I'll show you how to make it. To start, we're just going to grab a card base. I am using Native Navy here. All I'm going to do here is just fold my card base in half, and then I'm going to set this to the side. The key to this card is a panel of designer series paper that is 5 1/4 inches by 4. You want 4 inches wide, 5 1/4 tall, and you want it to be double-sided, and you want to like both sides because both sides of the paper are going to show on the front of the card. So make sure that coordinates together. Now, this next step is the most complicated. It's not all that complicated, but this will be the hardest thing that you do all evening for this card. I'm going to bring over a template for a minute, so if you're watching on your mobile device, you might want to get ready to take a screenshot. This is the template that I keep handy for when I reference this card. If you hop over to my Facebook page at The Faithful Stamper, you will be able to find a picture of all the projects that I'm making on this video, along with this template. So you might want to check that out. But there's your screenshot if you need it. But I'm going to walk you through this. It's not all that hard. The diagram looks a lot more difficult than it actually is. So you will need a ruler and a pencil. Depending on how dark your cardstock is, you might want a lighter colored pencil, like white or yellow, something that will show up a little bit better than a lead pencil on a darker DSP. So I like to measure, the first thing, I'm going to measure 2 1/4 inches from the left side of my designer series paper. But I'm going to pull my ruler down about 1.5 inches. So, because that's going to be where I want this dot to be, I just kind of get there in 2 steps. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to measure over 2 1/4 inches, and I'm just going to put my pencil down at that 2 1/4 inch mark. And before I make too much of a mark, I'm going to flip my ruler and I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches. I'm going to push my ruler right up against that pencil because that's where my 2 1/4 was. And I only need to move up just a little bit. So I'm just going to put a dot, my colored pencil, here we go, right here so I can see. And then I'm going to rotate my paper. And I'm going to measure up 1.5 inches from the bottom of the card. And I'm going to make a little tick mark right here at the very edge. And usually what I do is I leave my pencil there. I swing my paper back around just a little bit. And I line up my ruler from the edge of the paper where my pencil is at that tick mark to the dot I made, which is right here. You probably can't see it on the video. I can barely see it. But then I'm going to draw a line. Okay. So there you can see I've got my line drawn here on my paper. That's as complicated as we're going to get tonight. So the first step here, I'm going to grab a pair of scissors. I could probably do this on my paper cutter or paper trimmer, but I prefer scissors. So I'm just going to cut a straight line up to the dot. So I'm going to grab the wing at the top that I just created, and I'm going to fold it back. Now, you can fold it more so it's straight across, or you can kind of lift it at an angle to create more of an angle here. It's up to you. I'll show you 2 different versions here. Can you see the difference in the angles here on the card? So it's really up to you how you want to do it. There's no right or wrong, whatever you're comfortable with. So you could really pull it more the other way if you wanted, but I like to pull it this way. And just give it a crease when you're happy with the angle. Grab some adhesive, and I like to put the adhesive near the score line and then a little bit going up here. You don't need it all the way to the corner because you're going to cut off some of this, but you also don't want your flap to come loose. So fold that flap over, give it a good press, flip your paper over, and just trim off that extra. Nice straight cut. And then toss that scrap. So there's step one. You got that funny little nook that you just created. Now, step two, you'll need a scoring tool for. I might be able to do this freehand. I'm really not that confident in my abilities. So I like my paper trimmer scorer, but you can use any kind of scoring tool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the cutting track here, except I'm not using it as a cutting track. It's going to be a scoring track. I'm going to line up the bottom corner of my paper with the point on the cutting track line, and then I'm going to tilt the top forward until that little nook I created is also on the line. So from point to point. I'm going to use my scoring blade, so I'm going to move it down to the bottom. I kind of find it easier to start at the bottom. And you don't have to go clear up to the top here. We're just basically trying to encourage the paper to fold nicely. I definitely don't want to overshoot it and have a score line up here that's kind of out of place. So be mindful of that. And then also don't press super hard. Remember, this is designer series paper. If you press too hard, you're going to tear it. Then you'll have to start over. And I caution you just because I've done that plenty of times myself. So just a little bit of scoring. Again, to encourage that paper to fold. Paper score can go away. So there's a score line here. So I'm just going to fold that wing back and crease it. You can use a bone folder if you want. Put a little adhesive at the widest part where the angle of your wing is, and then go ahead and press that down. So this is the front of our card. We're going to do a couple other things here though. So I want to put a panel of cardstock underneath this before I put it on my card base. This is gray granite. It coordinates with my paper. You can use basic white as well. This is 5 1/4 by 4, same size as the piece of designer series paper that I used. So first of all, I'm going to lay these together because I want to get an idea where this window is. Now there's some different things you can do, but what I'm going to do is take a small image and stamp here in this open space. So I am using an image from our Nature's Prints stamp set. This coordinates with this paper. I'm going to use this small flower. It happens to be just the right size. And I'm going to stamp in gray granite ink. So this is a red rubber cling stamp. It has foam built into the stamp, so I don't need anything extra to stamp on. That's for photopolymer stamps. I'm going to lightly tap my stamp on my ink pad. I don't want to get too much ink on there. I can always add a little bit more if I'm not sure I got it all. Just don't smush your ink down into your paper or into your ink pad. Don't push your stamp down in your ink pad. Whew. I know what I'm trying to say, it just doesn't come out of my mouth the right way. So there is my stamped image. Now I'm going to show you a little trick because I want to create this sentiment piece here. I could just grab another scrap of paper, but something I never remember to do most of the time. I am going to stamp right here on the other side of my panel, and then cut out the image because when I put this panel over top, you're not going to see it. Hopefully you'll see what I'm trying to do. If you know you're going to cover up most of the panel, but you can get a piece out, you can save yourself paper. That's what I'm getting at. I'm probably not explaining that very well. and I hardly ever remember to do this. So I'm going to stamp down here near the edge because I don't want the punch to interfere with the writing or with the rest of the card, if that makes sense. Now, since the rest of that's going to be covered up, see what I did? I saved myself from using extra scrap. It might not work with every card you're doing, but it does happen to work with this one. So just a tip I thought I would share. So first up, I'm going to put some adhesive on the back of this panel. Like I said, I know it looks a little funny now that I did that, but it works. Except I don't want to get glue on my work surface, so I'm just going to grab my silicone craft mat here. All right. So this panel gets put on the front of your card. Always make sure you check to see that you're gluing it the right direction. It's always a stinker when you go to finish your card and realize you've glued the whole thing on upside down. Next, we're going to take that panel of DSP that we created, turn that over to the back, and add some adhesive. Now you want to get adhesive around your edges. Be really careful when you're working up here, especially if you're using a sticky tape runner, because it's very flexible and you don't want to tear it. I had a couple times where I came close to tearing it, so just a word to the wise. And now I'm just going to line up the corners here along this left edge, and then smooth my designer series paper down. And there is most of the front of my card. Now you'll see that we kind of created this interesting little angle here, and rarely does it come out perfect. But it doesn't necessarily turn out rotten most of the time. It's a little funny corner. So we're going to cover that up with the sentiment that we stamped. So I'm just going to layer these together. So that's our wonderful double oval punch. Now I'm going to grab some dimensionals. Woo. Help if I don't throw them across the table. And I always use all the extra bits around the edges of my dimensional sheets. Don't waste a thing. So take the backing off that, and then I'm just going to position my sentiment so it covers that little intersection there, like that. Now I'm going to finish the inside of the card. So for the inside, piece of basic white, 5 1/4 by 4. The sympathy sentiment and the inside sentiment are from the Inspired Thoughts stamp set. This really covers a lot of different occasions, so this is a really handy one to have. So I'm going to take some Night of Navy ink and my inside sentiment. And then for an accent, I'm going to revisit that flower from the front of the card and the gray granite ink. So I'm going to stamp it actually. I like to stamp it off the page, but I don't want to stamp on my work surface. So a little scrap paper helps. Like so. So there is the insert. And then while I've got it out, my envelope. And that way everything ties nicely together. So ink pads closed up here nice and quick. The sentiment panel gets adhesive and then put inside the card. And then there is just one finishing touch for the front. I decided I'm going to add a couple of pearls to this card. I don't want any bright shiny bling, but the pearl basic jewels are perfect for this card. So I'm going to grab my take your pick tool and just add some little pearls. Now it's up to you if you want to add any embellishments to your card, and if so, where you put them. You can put them around on your DSP. You can put them on the flaps, which is what I'm doing here. Totally up to you. All right. And just like that, my card is finished. So, fairly quick and simple, a fun fold, but not a really complicated one. Great for any occasion, and you can design this card however you like. You do have some options. For example, this card is basically the same. The only difference is I positioned my sentiment down near the bottom, and I die cut a butterfly to camouflage that corner. So you don't have to simply use your sentiment panel like we did here. You can experiment with different shapes, die cuts, punches, anything you like to cover up that corner. Here I used a different stamp. Wasn't as happy with that one, so that's why I ended up with a flower. But beautiful card either way. It can be used for a birthday card. Here I stamped multiple times to fill in some of this space. And I used a bigger punch here. And my pearls are placed around the card. Here is another sympathy card. Here I positioned my sentiment differently, and I used small punches to camouflage that little angle of the card. This is great for any occasion. And depending on what you're using the card for, and if you're using 12 by 12 paper, you can get 6 5¼ by 4 panels out of one sheet of 12 by 12. And for several of these cards, I actually went ahead and cut all 6 and cut supplies to make 6. And that way I can really quickly maneuver through making a bunch of cards and then have a bigger stash. And you could make your card, but leave your sentiment off until you know what you need it for. Birthday, sympathy, anniversary, whatever. So just another idea. Obviously this works for holidays. This is a Halloween card where I paired some items from our regular catalog along with some of our paper pumpkin stamps. If you're not familiar with Paper Pumpkin, hop on over to my website and check that out. It's basically a monthly card kit in a box that arrives on your doorstep, and you can create a project in about 30 minutes, depending on how quickly you like to work. Most of the time they're card kits, but we also have some fun treat boxes from time to time as well. So here are 2 fall cards. Here I used our beautiful Rustic Harvest Designer Series paper, and instead of a punch, I stamped my sentiment directly on the cardstock, and then I used one of the images from the Designer Series paper, and I just fussy cut that with scissors. These weren't too complicated to cut out. Popped them with dimensionals, and I've got a really cheerful looking fall card. And then I paired that with more Designer Series paper for my envelopes. This is also great for Christmas. Here I used our really adorable gnome suite, but instead of using cardstock here for the window, I used coordinating Designer Series paper. Now you can't always do that. Sometimes it's really difficult to match Designer Series paper, especially when you're talking about a double-sided piece and then another piece. But these gnomes work really well together. So all I did was I took a strip of the Designer Series paper and I glued that to the back of this panel before I glued it all down. You need about 2.5 inches in order to cover up the complete window. If you go narrower, you run the risk of having a gap here, and you'll need something bigger like the gnome to cover it up. So just keep that in mind. Here I added a banner and some sequins to pull the card together. And then if you haven't seen it already, we have a great masculine suite in the catalog right now that is beautiful. I guess it's more manly, not beautiful, masculine paper and prints. But it comes with 2 sheets of die cut shapes. All you have to do is pop them out and put them on your card. And I was kind of struggling with these 2 because I didn't have any stamps that went with them, so I wasn't sure what exactly I was going to do. This is perfect for this kind of card because I simply took the panel of paper, I did the cut to make the little wings. I didn't even add anything underneath here. This is just the card base. I put the little die cut on some dimensionals, added some bling that actually worked. I thought the colors worked well here with the amber and the beer or whatever that might be in your glass. And super quick, super easy cards. So great for all sorts of occasions. So I hope you enjoyed learning how to make our front fold, fun fold card. Again, you'll be able to find that template on my Facebook page. If you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe to this video. You can click the notification bell and then you'll be notified each time I post a new video. You can also find my Facebook Lives over on the Faithful Stamper Facebook page, and I also share different incentives and sales and things that are going on with Stampin' Up! There on that page. Thank you so much for watching. Take care and happy crafting.